Welcome to ICN Sunday Morning. I'm Vernon Loeb, Executive Editor. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration has released its annual hurricane forecast for 2025, and the predictions are, well, a bit frightening. With climate change warming oceans, which fuel storms with more energy, NOAA is forecasting above average hurricane activity, 13 to 19 named storms, 6 to 10 hurricanes, and 3 to 5 major hurricanes. These predictions really need to be taken seriously. Last year, as a reminder, there were 11 hurricanes, which was 4 above the average, and those included Helene and Milton, which killed more than 250 people and caused $120 billion in damage across the Southeast. This morning, I'll be joined by Amy Green, who covers Florida for us, has written a book about the Everglades, and is our seasonal hurricane watcher. Amy, thanks so much for joining me.
It's a pleasure.
So when NOAA released its annual forecast, the director of the National Weather Service said, "We're ready here at NOAA, are you?" But I think the real question is the Trump administration ready?
Right. Well, when it comes to the Trump administration now, there's just a lot of uncertainty. And when it comes to hurricane season, uncertainty is not great because, as one hurricane expert told me, uncertainty with hurricane season, it just creates another layer of stress as people are trying to prepare. At NOAA, as much as 30% of the workforce has been eliminated, which is what Rick Spinrad, the former NOAA administrator, told Inside Climate News. Although the current leader of NOAA, Laura Grimm, told reporters a couple weeks ago when NOAA released its predictions for hurricane season, she said that the National Hurricane Center is fully staffed. FEMA is in a lot of turmoil right now. President Donald Trump has suggested eliminating the agency altogether. The acting leader of FEMA was dismissed a few weeks ago, right before the start of hurricane season. And there's a story this week in the New York Times about the current leader of FEMA. It says that he made the comment that he didn't know that there was a hurricane season in the United States. The story said that it wasn't clear whether he was joking, although FEMA told the newspaper that he was in fact joking.
So Trump's budget proposal includes, I think, more than $1 billion in cuts from NOAA, and I think 646 million from FEMA. And FEMA, of course, is the agency responsible for responding to hurricanes. What are they trying to achieve with cuts of that magnitude?
Well, there was a leaked draft that Inside Climate News was able to obtain called the Passback. And in that document, it explained that a lot of the cuts were designed to eliminate unnecessary bureaucracy, unnecessary programs and grants, and to eliminate things that were not in line with the priorities of the Trump administration and the priorities of voters who put the Trump administration in place. And the changes also are in line with Project 2025, which is the conservative playbook for restructuring the federal government under the Trump presidency. And that document calls for NOAA to be taken apart and for a lot of those responsibilities to be privatized or moved to other agencies or just abolished altogether. And Project 2025 also calls for FEMA for a lot of those responsibilities to be moved to state and local governments.
So at the recent National Hurricane Conference, it was striking that the National Hurricane Center was not represented at the conference. Um, is there hurricane denial going on now? What did you make of that?
That's right. That was told to me by Craig Fugate, who is the former director of FEMA under the Obama administration, and he also was the leader of the Florida Division of Emergency Management. And he told me that no one from the National Hurricane Center attended this year's National Hurricane Conference in New Orleans. And he said he couldn't remember another time when that had happened. He said it was important because normally the National Hurricane Center would brief state and local emergency managers on new forecasting tools and techniques and products, things that emergency managers use to make decisions like when evacuations may be necessary. And he said that training is important because he said there can be high turnover among state and local emergency managers.
So let's talk about Florida for a minute. You're a lifelong Floridian. You live in Orlando now. I think you grew up in Sarasota. Um, if there's any state where people should know all about the new reality of climate amplified hurricanes, it's Florida, right? And I know you've done a lot of reporting in communities that have been battered by hurricanes. Is there still a sort of blue-red cultural, political divide there about climate change?
Well, surveys show that Floridians are more likely than other Americans to believe that climate change is happening and to support government programs to address that. And it's not hard to understand why that is. I will say that as a Floridian, when we are really in the thick of a big hurricane, climate change is not what we're thinking about because we just have, it's a hectic time. People are evacuating, or people who are not evacuating, we're securing our houses, we're making plans to go without power for a few days, and our kids will be out of school, and so it's just kind of a lot going on. I do think that things feel different today than they used to. I grew up in Clearwater in Sarasota, and growing up in the Tampa area, I can remember evacuating for a hurricane one time with my family. It was Hurricane Elena, and we stayed with my grandparents for a few days. Today, my daughter is 11. Her school has closed multiple times for multiple hurricanes, and it just feels different. I do hear Floridians asking questions like, especially Floridians who are new to the state, asking questions like, has it always been like this? I think the flooding last year that we saw with Hurricane Helene, and then also with Hurricane Milton just a few weeks later, really surprised a lot of Floridians. That flooding affected the entire Gulf Coast of Florida. And I think a lot of Floridians were unprepared for that. And then, of course, Milton happened only a few weeks later. And so homes that had flooded with Helene were flooded again with Milton. And so that feels different. And I can hear Floridians asking, has it always been like this? Why is it different? And we know why it's different. It's because of climate change.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting in that context that Florida's governor, DeSantis, is, if not exactly a climate change denier, he's sort of a climate change skeptic, maybe, or someone at least who likes to talk about uh, climate being politicized. And I think he signed a law this year or last year that essentially removes even references to climate change from um, state laws in Florida and removes it as well from even the planning by state agencies. Um, what do political observers there think? Is this going to be a smart strategy for him in the long term? I mean, given the reality that his residents are living in?
Well, Florida for many years was a swing state, but not anymore. And the state resoundingly reelected DeSantis the last time that he was up for election. We at Inside Climate News have done a lot of reporting on his climate policy, especially back when he was a GOP presidential candidate running against Donald Trump. But DeSantis's climate policy really has centered around adaptation and mitigation, and he has implemented a program called Resilient Florida, which has put a lot of money toward helping communities fortify their infrastructure against rising seas and storms and flooding. And that has really helped a lot of communities think about the future and about their needs to adapt, and that has been a good thing. But DeSantis has done nothing to move the state toward cleaner energy. And as you mentioned, his latest energy policy eliminates the words climate change from the state code, and it restructures the policy instead around fortifying the energy infrastructure against natural and man-made threats. DeSantis also made the comment last year after Hurricane Milton he made the comment after Hurricane Milton, he seemed to discount the role of climate change in the hurricane's intensity. He said that there's nothing new under the sun, and he talked about how the climate has always changed. He talked about how hurricane has always had storms, and we always will. And he seemed to be making the point that that his administration was prepared for that. And that really seemed to echo a narrative that I hear quite frequently in Florida, which is that the climate has changed throughout time and there's not a strong human role in that. And of course, we know that that while it's true the climate has changed over time, that human activity and greenhouse gas emissions and fossil fuel emissions are accelerating the heating of the global climate. And that's why clean energy programs are so important to address that problem.
Yeah. Well, I guess we should hope for the best for this hurricane season. And thanks so much for joining me.
I'm happy to. Thanks so much.
And thanks to all of you for reading and for supporting our work at Inside Climate News.